Kais Saied is under pressure. His allies and his opponents in Tunisia, as well as powerful foreign groups, are growing concerned about the future of the country since he suspended parliament in July and consolidated power. 3 months later, they all want to know what his exit strategy is. In October, the European Parliament adopted a resolution expressing concern over Said's concentration of power and calling for a return to normal functioning.
It's important to have a well-defined schedule to go back to the constitutional order.
While the president rebuffed foreign pressure, including a US Congress meeting on Tunisia, as unacceptable interference, it's at the local level that he's facing his most vocal critics. In September, a joint statement from 4 Tunisian political parties said the president was moving towards dictatorship and that he lost legitimacy by violating the constitution.
القرار الأول يتمثل في تجميد كل اختصاصات المجلس النيابي.
Since the 25th of July, Said has ruled the country unopposed, after he suspended parliament, dismissed the government, and granted himself emergency powers based on an article in Tunisia's 2014 constitution. He later announced measures to rule the country by decree and suspended chapters of the constitution. The decree gave him almost unlimited powers, allowing him to issue legislative text, appoint a new cabinet, and continue the suspension of parliament. Critics of Said's power grab labeled it a coup, while the president defended his intervention as a necessary step to end a legislative stalemate and save the country. He pledged to uphold rights and freedoms, but human rights organizations have sounded alarms over a campaign of arrests against critics of Said that include trials in military court and arbitrary house arrests. The Tunisian president has so far failed to clarify when he will relinquish his sweeping new powers. Instead, he says he'll appoint a committee to help draft amendments to the constitution and start a national dialogue on changing the country's electoral law and political system. Said added that the planned national dialogue will give voice to the disenfranchised youth of Tunisia and shut out the traitors.
من يذهبون إلى العواصم الغربية ومن يتسولون أمام السفارات على أعتاب بعض القوى الأجنبية، هؤلاء لا مكان لهم في هذا الحوار.
The Tunisian General Labour Union was alarmed by the comments and says it refuses to be sidelined in any new dialogue.
اللي يحب يعمل حوار وحده من غير اتحاد الشغل ومن غير مجتمع مدني ومن غير أحزاب سياسية يمشي يعمل حوار على روحه.
The union wields a lot of influence politically and has often played a role in mediating crises. In the years following the 2011 revolution, it pressured the government over economic rights, often resorting to strikes and intense negotiating tactics. It also played an integral part in the 2013 national dialogue and was part of a quartet of groups awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for helping prevent Tunisia's nascent democracy from descending into chaos. But the union is now one of many political players shut out of Kais Saied's Tunisia. Even the allies that supported his power grab are now beginning to doubt his decisions. In particular, hints that he intends to decentralize the political landscape. Despite not calling for the dissolution of Tunisia's political parties, Said has previously been vocal about their effectiveness, calling for a total reversal of the power pyramid and the election of local people's councils. It's a system his critics have compared to Libya under the rule of Muammar Gaddafi. The Secretary General of UGTT, Noureddin Taboubi, said in October that democracies were built with political parties and that the union would never accept a shift away from this. Many Tunisians disenchanted with the poor performance of successive governments after the revolution were supportive of the president's actions. 10 years of consensus politics have not brought a much-needed economic recovery, and many Tunisians blame the political system for this failure. Prior to 2011, Tunisia had a powerful presidential regime backed by a single-party system. But Tunisia's 2014 constitution laid out a new semi-presidential system, in which the president had a reduced role and shared power with the prime minister, who traces his authority to parliament. The prime minister was in charge of domestic affairs, while the president oversaw foreign and military affairs. The Tunisian constitution also set up a complex system of checks and balances to prevent any authority from having predominant powers. However, this power-sharing system was put to the test following elections in 2019. Without a clear majority, Parliament became divided between parties fighting for power and a president who was a political outsider. Intense disagreements over government formations, laws, budget, ideology, and even personal matters became regular national headlines. This was heightened by a bitter and public rivalry between the president and the prime minister. Tunisians watched in shock as violent brawls broke out between lawmakers, scenes that tarnished the parliament's reputation and triggered calls on social media for it to be dissolved. And on the 25th of July, when Said announced his suspension of parliament, many Tunisians celebrated. The president's power grab presented for some a clean break from a struggling transition fraught with political polarization and economic decline. Between 2011 and 2019, Tunisia's GDP growth averaged just 1.7%, significantly below pre-revolution levels, exacerbated further by the COVID-19 pandemic. By March 2021, unemployment reached nearly 18%, and a further 600,000 Tunisians had fallen below the poverty line, raising the total number to 2.1 million, over 20% of the country's total population. Tunisia is heavily in debt and relies primarily on loans and aid. In 2020, its external debt amounted to over $48 billion. But 3 months on since Kais Saied's suspension of parliament, Tunisia's economic troubles have only worsened. On the 6th of October, the central bank announced a severe shortage of external financial resources and a deficit in its annual budget. The international rating agency Moody's downgraded Tunisia's credit rating from B3 to Caa1, while maintaining a negative outlook. It cited weakening governance and uncertainty regarding government capacity to secure funds. With Tunisia facing its biggest political crisis in a decade and an economy on the brink of recession, will Kais Saied's popularity and outsider status be enough to maintain his grip on power?